What you see on the screen right now is one of the best swords in the game. It's named the 50Mil Midas. It has a very interesting past, as they have had to buff it a few times to actually make it the best weapon in the game. As you can probably tell by the name though, it does cost 50 million coins to purchase this sword, and that is actually excluding buying the enchantments for it. So overall, a maxed out 50Mil Midas with max enchants would cost up to 100 million coins. I mean, if you do have 100 million coins laying around and you can purchase this weapon, I mean, it's well deserved and you deserve the weapon. That's just a crazy amount of money to spend on one item. Anyways though, in today's video we will be talking about the history of the 50 million coin Midas. Before we get into things though, I have some credit to give to Zach Plays and because he originally did make this video, but there is a few things that he did leave out and I'd like to kind of add to it. So yeah, a huge shout out to him, and make sure you go subscribe to him, check him out in the description. Now, if you are not a Skyblock player, you probably have no clue what the Midas sword is, so let's give some context. Back on July 2nd of 2019, Skyblock had the update of 0.5, and it added the Dark Auction. But why am I actually telling you this? And that's because the Dark Auction had the item the Midas. So in the beginning of the video, I was telling you about the 50Mil Midas, and there's actually different types of the Midas sword. So for an example, if you bid only 1 million coins on the Midas, you get a 1 million coin Midas sword. And why this is interesting is because depending on how many coins you purchase or spend on the sword, you actually get a different amount of damage bonus. And that's why it does make the sword so good, because the more coins you spend on it, the more damage it ends up dealing. Currently though, there is a cap to the sword at 50 million coins, so that's why everyone calls it the 50Mil Midas, because the max amount of damage bonus comes from 50 million coins. The Dark Auction is kind of similar to the regular auction house. It's just like basically the same thing as the player selling the items, but the NPC just sells the items. And at the time of this video, there are currently only 14 items being rotated throughout every single Dark Auction. So it's actually like a pretty cool system, because usually you don't see the same item at every single auction. But the items are the Flower Minion, Spirit Mask, Ender Artifact, Wither Artifact, Parrot Pet, Turtle Pet, Jellyfish Pet, Sharpness 6 book, Giant Killer 6 book, Protection 6 book, Growth 6 book, Power 6 book, Travel Scroll of the Dark Auctions, and of course the Midas Sword. So as I said earlier in the intro, there were actually a few changes made to the weapon to make it a little bit better. So let's compare the old Midas with the current Midas. As you can see in the left, the old Midas had a damage bonus cap set to 80, while on the right, the Midas sword has the bonus of 120. So right there you can see that the bonus was increased by 40 damage. And before the buff, the sword wasn't worth getting because the AOTD, which is also known as the Aspect of the Dragons, was a way cheaper sword and a way stronger sword. But now because of this buff, the Midas is obviously way better. And there's probably one more thing that you've noticed, but I haven't even said yet, was that the old Midas sword was the epic rarity. And it's actually kind of weird because there weren't too many of them back in the day, but if you didn't know, the old Midas was an epic rarity, but now the current Midas is the legendary rarity. If you didn't know, rarity is actually a pretty big deal, because the better the rarity of an item is, the better reforge stats are added to your weapon. Now, most people know who Time Dio is, and a lot of people think that he was the first player to obtain the 50Mil Midas. But he actually wasn't. The only reason people think this is because he has hundreds of thousands of views on his video that he made about the Midas, but nobody has actually really seen the first original 50Mil Midas video. I think it has like a little less than 2,000 views. So who was the person to buy this Midas? And he went by the name of Noodle Ball. So funny story, which you will see in a second, he actually had to like fight over the Midas. So instead of him paying just regular 50 million coins, he had to pay like 52 million coins. But yeah, here's a 30-second clip of him buying it. And as you see, he bought the Midas sword, which at the time was the strongest sword in the game. And yeah, I said at the time because they actually had the pet update, and when pets were introduced, there was a new Ender Dragon pet, which actually made the AOTD deal a lot more damage than the Midas sword. And that was kind of game changing, because when people found out about the buff to the AOTD while using the Ender Dragon pet, basically everyone sold their Midas swords. There was such a high supply and so little demand on the auction house for the Midas sword that literally it cost like 70 mil to buy a maxed out one, when maybe a couple months back it would be about 100 mil. Alright, so one thing before we continue the video is that we are so close to hitting 50k. I mean, we're right around the corner, so please, if you would like to help me out, please consider subscribing. It is totally free, and you can always unsubscribe later. Also, one thing I've noticed about my statistics is that not too many people actually have the notification bell turned on, so just make sure to double check and turn notifications on so you can actually see future videos. Okay, let's get back to the video. And then Dungeons came out, which added a lot of new reforges that could basically make a lot of weapons a lot stronger. There was a new glided reforge specifically only meant for the Midas sword, and it made the Midas sword a lot stronger than it ever was, but there was also a new fabled reforge that kind of made every other sword in the game a lot stronger too. And if you added this reforge to the AOTD and combining it with the Ender Dragon pet, it still made it stronger than the Midas sword. So here's a quick clip to show the difference between the glided Midas sword and the fabled AOTD.
So let's go ahead and hit a mob. 436k. 436k, that is ridiculous. So if we switch to our aspect of the dragons here, 460, 450, and then the Midas, like we said, does 436k consistently. 423, 455, 423. So it does look like the AOTD does do more damage still than a Gilded Midas. So what I wanted to do next was try a fabled aspect, or not a fable. We're going to try a fabled Midas. 399, 445, 389, 418. It looks like the Gilded does more consistent higher damage. 411, 403. Yeah, so the Gilded Midas definitely is better than a fabled. Every once in a while you'll get a crit that's higher than the 430.
So either way, as you can see, the glided Midas, it's still pretty good, but it's just not as good as the AOTD. I wonder if there will ever be like a pet that makes the Midas better so it can actually deal more damage than an AOTD, because at this current state in Skyblock, an AOTD costs like 3 to 4 mil to buy, when the Midas would cost around over 50 mil, obviously, because that's when you need the damage bonus. So yeah, it'd be kind of cool if they somehow came up with some, like, Midas pet type idea, and maybe, you know, use a bunch of gold to craft it or something. Either way, though, if you guys have any ideas on, like, some cool pets or ideas or something they could do for, like, a Midas sword pet type thing, drop that down below in the comments. If you guys did enjoy, make sure you do drop a like, and we're so close to 50k, so once again, hit that sub button. Hopefully, you guys did enjoy this little short video about the history of the Midas sword, and maybe there'll be some cool changes soon to make it even stronger than the AOTD again.